Can you explain why you're not a socialist? I feel like I heard you say you're not really socialist before. I have formative opinions on the whole concept. My economic philosophy is... It's tough because I don't fully buy into either theory of value. I think they're both pretty flawed. But there's also like not... It seems to be like a big unanswered question. And so the issue for me right now is that, like, in an ideal world, I don't think generational wealth or generally speaking property really exists. But part of constructing an economic philosophy around your ethical framework is contending with some level of the world as it is and using the economic philosophy that leads to the most social good based on what your ethics in question are. Listen, once we get to a functioning social democracy in the US, I can totally imagine myself becoming further left and really starting to consider myself a socialist if I see the avenues and vessels for gaining that kind of power and running that sort of an experiment. But in order for a socialist country to work, there's a lot of things that have to fall into place, including a global experiment in which basically a global socialist network is able to protect each other's power from capitalistic elements that oppose it. I've never seen a post-social democracy experiment succeed because it always gets heavily... Social democracies get undermined all the time, and the only ones that have survived are in Europe because they have the existing power vessels to protect it, right? But then when you go even further beyond that and remove all profit motive and you remove all private capital from the equation, how do you concentrate the power to protect that experiment, right? Like that seems like the really difficult part. Yeah, I'll just drive this guy to the airport. It's more pragmatic concerns given that we're in a capitalist society right now. Yes, but also there is one ethical concern I have, which is my concern is with the system that accomplishes the most good. And there is a very strong argument that there is a certain level of profit motive that drives serious good in an economy, because at the end of the day, you don't know exactly where you need to put your money. And there's this, I don't know if this is the greater fool theory, but one of the things about capitalism is that the level of the profit motive incentivizes a certain amount of risk that leads people with money to put a lot of money into a lot of different places so that you get the thing that is going to do a lot of social good a lot quicker because people are willing to take the risk to accomplish it first. And even though, so for example, like, not necessarily with coronavirus, but with, say, another disease that hasn't even become a real thing yet, but could become a big problem, you could have pharmaceutical companies dumping money into researching a cure for a virus that hasn't even struck yet, because if it strikes, they can make a killing off of it. And they can still profit in an ethical fashion because what would happen is the governments would basically, in my system, the governments would pay them a fair profit for what they... Actually, So like, if that cure hits before a new pandemic comes along, there is the ability for us to say, okay, I mean, here's a certain amount of profit that we're willing to give you that will allow us to pay for your drug, reward you for taking the risk, and then distribute that drug affordably to all of our citizens. And that's a drug that may not exist in a system where people aren't motivated by profit to take those kinds of risks. So that's an extreme example. Take something like electric cars, right? If not for profit motive, I don't know when electric cars would have been created. And definitely if not for government money, electric cars may never have been created, right? Like, those both worked in tandem. So if I'm understanding correctly, you think a capitalist system maximizes the most good than a socialist system? I guess this really gets into, like, is a social democracy really... Social democracy is definitely not a socialist system because private capital obviously exists. But it's not... Is it really a capitalist system? Like... I kind of feel like what it really is a system that relies heavily on democratically owned capital, but basically creates profit motive in areas where it might be beneficial to society, right? Guess I haven't done this. No, I haven't done this gun jump, but so I do think some message of, like, I do think democratic ownership is a good thing to aim for, and I think that capitalists are way too they kind of have to be in self-interest, right? Like, I think that capitalists way overhype their competency in understanding how to allocate resources, I guess. I didn't know which way I was oriented. And I largely believe in democratic ownership of stuff, or at least in cooperative ownership, right? Or not cooperative, at least in mutual ownership of most, of most means of production, right? Like, I like the 50% private, 50% public model. That seems to work out really well in countries, in industries where it applies. So I do like the idea of mutual ownership. That seems to work out really well. I like the idea of democratic ownership, but I do think that some level of... Really? You can use a rifle to... There's a rifle animation on carjacking? I do think private capital motivates a certain level of risk taking that can provide massive benefits for an economy. I think that a lot of the ethical issues around labor now, it's difficult because a decent portion of labor theory of value is talking about generational wealth. But I don't think labor theory of value accounts for risk. That there is value in risk, and I don't think publics are capable of taking risk in the same way a profit-motivated individual is. I don't know, I have to read Capital before I really form a strong opinion on the subject, but yeah. Maybe estate tax should be 100%. Maybe that's what I think. Maybe that's my ultimate ethical decision, is that estate tax should be 100%. That would be actually such a funny meme, is that, like, pure unfettered anarcho-capitalism, but the only thing is when you die, the government takes all your money, and when, like, your parent or guardian or, someone that you're... Basically, when you die, you designate an heir, and that heir receives, like, $25,000 and whatever, like, kind of decommodified resources it deems appropriate. That would be really funny. But yeah, I don't know. Theories of value are really difficult, and I definitely acknowledge that there's a serious flaw in a system that basically takes the entire difference between a monopsonist's designated wages, which really is what, like, wages are ultimately decided by capital owners, and a system that takes the wage value that capital owners decide is appropriate for labor, minus, government intervention via minimum wage, and takes the difference between that plus the raw materials, and then says the entire difference between that and the final value is all profit. There's a serious problem in that system. But also, like, maybe my brand of social democracy is just viciously anti-monopoly, right? Maybe that's what it is. Because that's really where the problem lies, is the monopolist's ability to determine the labor value of their product. I don't know, it's tough. I'm generally anti-monopoly, except for where, monopolies a temporary monopoly leads to a better outcome than if there hadn't been that private motive in the first place, which there's plenty of innovation that can account for that. And the best way to prevent monopsonies is through some form of mutual ownership, which I think in the long run is the best system. But I think it's reasonable to say that, like, people should be able to profit from their risk, but they shouldn't be able to just have full and complete reign over, like, deciding how much profit is putting all of the power for determining your level of profit in the hands of the person who took the risk it seems really excessive. All right, so right about here. That's the problem I have, right? It's not that you want to make a fair profit for the risk you took. It's that, like, you're only willing to defend a system in which you get to decide what that level of profit is, at the expense of literally everyone else who does not have the same power, who does not have the power to contest you on it. So, and that ultimately is the role of the public, is to intervene and say, like, and rein in excessive profiteering. And if monopolies are the only way that you can profit off your risk in a free market, then maybe that market shouldn't necessarily be free. In that sense, right? Maybe the French-Belgian multi-payer system model is actually a really effective one, and having, say, an NGO independently research and work with private companies to basically determine what your level of risk is and determine an equitable profit level to continue incentivizing that risk. Maybe that's the way to go, because also you don't want too much risk. You don't want too many people taking too much risk, right? Like, I don't know. Very, very complicated stuff. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe for future videos. I'm going to be putting out new videos every day. We're going to be talking about global politics, the far right. We're going to be talking about healthcare. And if you want to join the discussion live, I stream to Twitch live at 1 p.m. on weekdays, Eastern Time. Otherwise, stay tuned. New videos every day. Thanks so much for watching.